The town of Red Hollow had always been noisy by day and cruel by night. Dust curled through the streets like restless ghosts, kicked up by boots, hooves, and the weight of too many hard lives lived too fast. Men drank, women worked, and everyone watched everyone else. Nothing went unseen in Red Hollow, especially not failure. And that was exactly what they called her. Failure. Her name was Clara May, though most folks never bothered to use it. To them, she was the extra girl, the one no family claimed once hard times came. Too quiet, too plain, too slow to speak up for herself. When her parents died of fever 3 winters back, no one stepped forward to take her in. No one needed another mouth to feed. So she drifted from chore to chore, sleeping in barns, earning scraps of bread, listening as people laughed behind her back. And then there was Luke Calder. Luke was everything Red Hollow admired: tall, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and famous for his wild grins and reckless ways. He rode into town with dust on his boots and trouble trailing right behind him. No man could ride harder, shoot straighter, or charm faster. Women watched him like a storm they hoped would break over them. Men either wanted to be him or fight him. To Luke Calder, life was a wager and laughter was easiest when aimed at someone weaker. That was how Clara became his joke. It happened outside Miller's saloon on a blazing summer afternoon. Luke and his ranch hands were lounging on the porch, boots kicked up, whiskey in hand. Clara passed by carrying a cracked bucket of water, eyes low, trying to stay invisible as she always did. "Hey there, ghost girl," Luke called out with a lazy grin. "Where you haunting off to in such a hurry?" The men laughed. Clara stiffened but didn't answer. Luke hopped down from the porch and stepped into her path. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just allergic to real men?" More laughter. Clara swallowed. "Just heading to the stable, sir." Something about the word sir made the men howl even louder. Luke cocked his head, studying her like a puzzle he'd already solved. "You know what, boys?" he said. "This here town's been awful dull lately." Then he looked straight at Clara. "Why don't you come work for me?" The laughter froze into surprised silence. Clara blinked. "Work for you?" Luke grinned. "Yeah, I'll even pay you. Room, food, a few coins. What do you say?" The men snorted. They all knew what this was Luke's latest joke. Clara hesitated. No one had made her an offer like that since her parents died. Food, shelter, steady work. It sounded like a miracle dressed up in mockery. "I'll do anything," she said quietly. Luke burst out laughing. "Anything, huh? You hear that, boys?" They laughed louder. "Fine," Luke said. "Be at my ranch by sundown. If you actually show up, I'll put you to work mucking stalls." He turned back toward the saloon, fully expecting never to see her again. But Clara May was not joking. She walked the dusty road alone for 6 miles that evening, blistered feet aching inside worn shoes. The sky bled red as the sun sank, and coyotes cried in the distance. Fear whispered at her, but hunger whispered louder. When the iron gates of Calder Ranch came into view, she nearly turned back, but she didn't. Luke was sitting on the fence when she arrived, surprised enough to nearly fall off. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "You actually came." "I said I would," Clara replied softly. The ranch hands chuckled. Luke stood and dusted off his coat. "Guess I'll have to let you stay then. Don't slow us down." He tossed her a rag. "First stall's that one. Don't pass out before you're done." She worked until her hands bled and her arms shook. The stench of horse sweat and manure soaked into her clothes. The men watched her struggle, half amused, half annoyed. Luke didn't help. He only watched. She ate alone that night, a small plate scraped together after the men finished. Still, it was more than she'd eaten in 2 days. When sleep overtook her on a pile of hay, she curled up without complaint. Luke expected her gone by morning. But she wasn't. Day after day, she stayed, working, bleeding, enduring. The men laughed at first, made wagers on how long she'd last. Luke joined in. He teased her when she spilled grain, mocked her when she stumbled under heavy buckets, called her tag-along when she trailed behind the crew. "You planning on following me into the grave too?" He joked once. "If you tell me to," she replied calmly. That answer unsettled him. He started noticing things he hadn't before. How she woke before dawn without being told. How she stitched torn saddles by lantern light. How she flinched at shouting but never ran from work. And most of all, how she followed him everywhere. Wherever Luke went, she was there behind him. Not in a clingy way, not in a needy way, just steady. When he rode fence, she walked it. When he checked cattle, she counted with him. When he drank at night by the fire, she sat nearby, silent, listening. One night by the fire, Luke finally snapped. "Why do you keep sticking to me like a shadow?" Clara stared into the flames. "Because you said I could stay. That was a joke." I didn't hear a laugh when I agreed. The other men grew quiet. Luke scoffed. "You don't belong here. You're not made for this life." She looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "I don't belong anywhere," she said. "But I'm useful here." For the first time, Luke didn't laugh. Something in his chest shifted just slightly. Not sympathy. Not yet. Something closer to discomfort. He turned away. "Do what you want." And she did. She stayed. By the end of the week, the jokes stopped, not because Luke respected her yet, but because she hadn't left. And slowly, the thing that began as mockery started becoming something he couldn't ignore. The day the joke ended began like any other. The sun rose sharp and unforgiving over Calder Ranch, burning the dew from the grass before Clara could finish her first round of chores. The men moved with their usual easy swagger, saddles creaking, spurs clinking. Luke led them as always, confident, loud, fearless. Too fearless. A thunderstorm had rolled through the night before, scattering a section of the north fence and driving part of the cattle toward the ravine. By mid-morning, the missing herd had been spotted near breakneck cliffs where one wrong step meant death. Luke mounted. "First, let's bring 'em back before they spook." "Further," he ordered. The men followed. Clara stood near the barn with a basket of supplies meant for the fields. No one had told her to ride, and she didn't own a horse anyway. But when Luke glanced back and saw her standing there, something in his eyes flickered. "Stay here," he snapped. She nodded. But she didn't go inside. She watched the riders disappear into a rolling sea of dust and hills, unease tightening in her chest like a pulled rope. She'd seen storms scatter men before. She'd seen what ravines did. An hour passed. Then another. The hills were quiet for too long. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed across the plain. Then shouting. Clara dropped the basket and ran. The ravine smelled of wet clay and panic. The cattle had been herded back successfully, but the victory had claimed a price. Luke lay half-conscious at the edge of the rocks. His horse spooked and missing, his leg twisted at a terrible angle beneath him. Blood darkened his trouser from thigh, too. The men were frantic but helpless. He took the fall instead of letting the horse go. "Over," Munn muttered. "He ain't macking it back if we don't move." Fast. Luke's face had gone pale beneath the dust. His eyes fluttered. "Don't?" "Need help," he growled weakly. Clara pushed through the men. "I can help." They stared at her. She kneeled beside Luke without hesitation, tearing a strip from her own skirt to bind the bleeding. Her hand shook, but only from urgency, not fear. Luke groaned. "The hell are you doing here?" "You fell," she whispered. "You're bleeding. Go home." She ignored him. When the men lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher, It was Clara who stayed at his side the entire way back to the ranch, whispering to keep him awake. Wiping the dust from his eyes, Luke faded in and out of consciousness. Her face the last thing he saw before darkness claimed him. The doctor came late. The verdict came heavier. Broken leg. Torn muscle. Infection risk. Luke would be off his feet for months, if he walked again at all. The ranch frozen quiet. Uncertainty. Calder Ranch ran on Luke's strength. Without him, everything slowed. Orders were shorter. Laughter was rare. And still Clara remained at Luke's side. She brought water, changed bandages, bathed his fevered body while turning her eyes away in shy respect. The men expected Luke to send her away. He didn't doubt at first. He barely noticed her. Pain ruled his world. Fire in his bones. Rage in his chest. He cursed the ceiling, the doctors, the horse, God himself. Clara said nothing. She simply stayed. When fever struck, she sat through the night cooling his burning skin with damp cloths. When he woke screaming from pain, she held his shoulders until the shaking stopped. When pride made him lash out, she accepted his words without defending herself. One night, as rain drummed against the roof, Luke woke to find her asleep in the chair beside his bed, head resting on her folded arms. He watched her for a long time. For the first time, he truly saw her, the thin scars on her hands, the exhaustion etched into her face, the stubborn refusal to leave. Why? He whispered. She stirred. Why what? Why are you still here? She answered without hesitation. Because you never told me to go. His jaw tightened. And if I do? She met his eyes. Then I will. The truth of her loyalty hit harder than the fall ever had. Days passed, then weeks. The men worked awkwardly without Luke's command. But it was Clara who kept quiet order. Clara who remembered schedules. Clara who calmed tempers. Clara who brought Luke updates from the yard, so he would not feel lost. Luke's dependence on her grew like an ache. When she was gone too long, his chest felt tight. When she returned, relief washed over him like shameful peace. And still, he said nothing. Until the night the infection came, his leg turned red and hot. Fever returned violently. The doctor had been delayed by storm and distance. Panic seized the ranch. Clara refused to leave his side. Everyone else eventually slept. She did not. At dawn, Luke drifted between life and death. In delirium, he reached blindly and her hand was already there. Don't go, he murmured without knowing who he spoke to. I'm here. Don't leave me, he said again. Clara's eyes filled slowly. I won't. When the doctor finally arrived and drained the infection, saving Luke's life by a narrow margin, Clara fainted from exhaustion beside his bed. Luke watched her sleep later with a heart heavy with something unfamiliar. Gratitude. Fear. Respect. And something trembling dangerously close to need. After the fever broke, Luke changed. His voice softened. His jokes disappeared. And the first words he spoke after the worst had passed were not orders. They were an apology. I didn't think you'd stay, he admitted weakly. I told you I would. I treated you like nothing. She looked away. You gave me a place to sleep. That ain't the same as respect. No, she admitted softly. It isn't. He swallowed. I'm sorry. The words tasted strange on his tongue. She nodded. That was all. But to Luke, it was everything. The joke was over, and the man who once laughed at her now lay alive only because she never left his side. When Luke Calder stood on his own 2 feet again for the first time, the ranch went silent. Every man stopped what he was doing. Hammers paused. Horses stilled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as Luke took his first trembling steps across the wooden porch. Leaning heavily on a cane. Clara stood just behind him, hands ready but not touching. Easy, she whispered. Luke clenched his jaw and took another step. Pain shot up his leg like lightning, but he refused to cry out. Sweat broke across his brow. I've got it, he growled. She said nothing, but she stayed close. By the time he reached the porch rail, the men erupted into cheers. For a moment, Luke felt like himself again, the powerful rancher, the leader, the unbreakable man. But the truth was harsher. His body was weaker, his balance uncertain, and his old life had shifted in ways he could not yet understand. And the most unsettling change of all? He needed Clara. Not just for his body, but for his calm. As the weeks passed, Luke grew stronger, but his temper returned even faster. The same fire that once made him fearless now made him dangerous again. He hated being seen as fragile. He hated that the men watched him carefully. And, worst of all, he hated that everyone now looked at Clara with quiet respect. She had become more than a helper. She had become necessary. The men went to her with questions about feed schedules, about supply counts, about Luke's condition. Whispers followed her now, no longer mocking, but curious, and that stirred something ugly inside Luke. On a bitter afternoon, a group of rival ranchers rode onto Calder land without permission. Men Luke had clashed with before over grazing rights. They dismounted boldly at the gate, smug smiles cutting their faces. Luke insisted on meeting them himself. Clara begged him not to. You are not ready, she warned quietly. I don't hide behind fences. Luke snapped. You're still healing. I said I'm fine. She reached for his arm. Please. He shook her off. The rejection cut her deeper than she showed. The confrontation became heated fast. You lost your grip when you hit that ravine, one rival sneered. Word is a girl runs this place now. Luke drew his gun before Clara could stop him. The standoff was tense, deadly quiet. Hands hovered near holsters. Horses stamped nervously. Then, Luke's injured leg betrayed him. It buckled. He fell hard into the dirt. The rivals laughed. One kicked dust toward his face. Looks like the joke's on you now, Calder. Before anyone could react, Clara ran forward and stood between Luke and the armed men. You will leave, she said, voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. They laughed at her. Luke tried to rise. She shoved him back down. Stay, she ordered softly. The rivals saw the fire in her eyes. Then not fear, not weakness, but unwavering defiance. And in that moment, something shattered inside Luke. Pride, arrogance, the last fragments of the man he used to be, because the woman he once mocked now shielded him with her body. The rivals hesitated. Then one spat into the dirt and mounted his horse. Not worth the blood, he sneered. They rode off. Silence fell. Luke lay staring up at Clara as she turned slowly back toward him. Her voice broke for the first time since he had known her. You could have been killed. So could you, he snapped weakly. She shook her head. I chose to stand there. You chose to fall into old fire. His anger died in his throat. For the first time, he saw what he had asked of her again and again, without ever saying the words. To follow him, to protect him, to stay. He had never truly thanked her. That night, Luke could not sleep. The image of her small frame standing between him and death burned in his mind. By morning, he made a decision. He called every man on the ranch together. And Clara. She stood awkwardly at the edge of the group, hands folded, uncertain. Luke leaned on his cane, face hard with effort. This ranch is breathin' because of her, he said. The men fell silent. She kept me alive. She kept all of this runnin'. And I treated her like she was nothin'. He turned to Clara. I was wrong. The words were public, heavy, unavoidable. Her eyes widened. I don't want your pity, she said. Quietly. You got no pity from me, he replied. You got my respect. He handed her a small, worn leather ledger ownership records. You are my right hand now. Equal voice. Equal pay. Gasps rippled through the men. Clara stared at the book like it might vanish if she touched it. You never asked for anything. Luke interrupted. That's the problem. Her fingers trembled as she accepted it. And for the first time since her parents died, someone had publicly chosen her not out of charity, but out of honor. That evening, after the men returned to work, Clara found Luke alone by the corral. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. She hesitated. Why now? He met her gaze steadily. Because today I saw what I almost destroyed with my pride. You didn't destroy me, she whispered. He exhaled slowly. I came close. They stood in heavy silence. Then Luke said the truth he had been running from. If you had fallen today, I wouldn't have survived it. Her breath caught. Neither spoke of love, but both felt it blooming in the quiet spaces between the words. That night, Clara did not stay by his bed out of duty. She stayed because he asked her to remain, and for the first time, his request was gentle. The change in Luke Calder did not go unnoticed. Men spoke differently around him now. The fire in his temper had cooled into something steadier. Orders came slower, but wiser. And Clara, once invisible, now stood openly at his side during planning meetings, supply counts, and fence disputes. Some respected it. Others resented it. And resentment, like rot, never stays hidden for long. The warning came on a quiet afternoon. Clara had ridden into town for supplies at Luke's insistence. He hated letting her go alone, but the ranch needed medicine and feed. And the trail was familiar. She never returned by sundown. Luke waited. Then he paced. Then the unease became a cold knot in his chest. By midnight, a rider arrived breathless at the gate. She was followed, the man said. 3 men. The same ones from the North Ridge. They took her off the road. The world went red. Luke mounted before another word could be spoken. The North Ridge was a wasteland of rock and shadow. A place where law gave way to cruelty and prayers were swallowed by the wind. Luke followed fresh hoof prints through moonlit dust. Pain screaming through his still healing leg with every mile. But he did not slow. He could not. Clara was out there. Alone. With men who saw her as nothing more than something to claim. Thought nearly drove him mad. Found her at an abandoned cattle shack near the ridge. Tied to a post, bruised but unbroken. Her head lifted when she heard gunfire crack through the chill. Night. Luke burst through the rotting door like a force of nature. Get away from her. The men laughed. Then one of them fell, with a bullet through his shoulder. The fight was fast, brutal, desperate. Luke moved with the fury of a man who had already lost once and refused to lose again. When it was over, the remaining men lay bleeding in the dirt, groaning for mercy. Luke cut the ropes with shaking hands. Clara collapsed into his arms. You came, she whispered. His voice broke. Always. He carried her back to the horse and held her the entire ride home, and in that ride, he made his choice. There would be no more half-truths. No more distance. No more waiting. The ranch lights were glowing when they arrived. The men rushed forward, relief pouring through them like rain after drought. Clara was taken to the infirmary. Luke refused to leave. Not when the doctor cleaned her wounds. Not when she slept fitfully from exhaustion. Not when dawn bled pale gold through the windows. He stayed because he finally understood something simple and terrifying. If she left him now, not by will, but by fate, there would be nothing left in him that could survive it. When Clara woke, Luke was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped tightly around hers. She watched him quietly. For the first time, she saw how much his face had changed. The sharp recklessness softened into something worn, protective. Frightened. She had followed him out of survival. She had stayed from loyalty. But now, she realized he stayed for love. Later that day, he asked the doctor for privacy, and then he did something he had never done before. He knelt out. The pain in his leg nearly brought tears to his eyes, but he refused help. "Luke," she whispered. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He lifted his gaze. "I took you as a joke," he said quietly. "I laughed when I should have listened. I watched while you carried my life on your shoulders. And when they took you, I learned what it means to be truly afraid." Her breath trembled. "I don't want you here out of debt," he continued. "I don't want you here because you think you belong nowhere else." He swallowed hard. "I want you with me because I love you." Silence filled the room. Clara's world shifted, slowly. She lowered herself to her knees in front of him so they stood eye to eye. "I followed you because I had nowhere else to go," she said softly. "I stayed because I believed you still had good in you. And I nearly died because I thought you were worth protecting." His eyes darkened with pain and devotion. "I am willing to choose you," she said. "But not as your shadow." He nodded. "As my equal." Her lips curved with trembling hope. That night, danger no longer lingered outside the ranch, but it had already done its work inside their hearts. Threat had forced the truth into the light. Luke. Calder no longer laughed at the woman who would not leave his side. Now, he feared losing her more than he had ever feared death. Asterisk. The ranch did not return to normal after the night. Clara was taken. It became something better. Quieter. Stronger. True. Luke. Calder moved through each day with a different weight on his shoulders, now not the burden of pride, but the responsibility of love. Clara healed slowly from the bruises and fear that still lived behind her eyes, yet she never wavered. She returned to her work with steady determination, though Luke tried to shield her more than she liked. "You can't guard the wind," she once told him gently. "And you cannot guard me from living." He nodded, learning, always learning now. One evening, weeks after the attack, Luke led Clara to the far ridge where the land opened into endless sky. It was the first place he had ever brought her that wasn't tied to work or survival. The sun melted into the horizon, painting the world gold and amber. Wind moved through the tall grass like whispers of all they had survived. "I used to come here alone," Luke said. "It was the only place I ever felt small enough to think." Clara smiled faintly. "Do you feel small now?" He looked at her. "No, I feel honest." He took her hands. "Everything I built before you came into my life was built for me. My name, my land, my pride. And I almost lost it all because I didn't understand that strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It stays. It refuses to leave even when it is treated like nothing." Her eyes glistened. "I don't know how to love gently," he admitted, "but I know how to stay. I know how to protect. And I know one thing with certainty: my life does not make sense without you in it." He dropped to one knee. Not in triumph, but in humility. "Stay with me. Not because you once had nowhere else to go. Stay because you choose me the way I now choose you." Tears rolled freely down Clara's face. She had been unwanted, unseen. Until now. "I will stay," she whispered, "because you no longer see me as a shadow." He rose and pulled her into his arms as the sky darkened into stars. The wedding was not grand. It was right. The men built an arch from old fence posts and wildflowers. The cook baked bread with hands that shook from joy. The horses stood quietly as if they, too, understood the sacredness of the moment. Clara wore a simple white dress sewn from borrowed cloth. Luke wore his cleanest shirt and the nervous expression of a man afraid to blink in case he woke from a dream. Clara walked forward. The ranch fell silent, not because she was unfamiliar, but because she was beloved. Luke's voice broke as he took her hands. "I once laughed when you followed me," he said. "Today, I kneel before the woman who saved my life and taught me how to keep one." Clara lifted trembling fingers to his face. "You gave me a place when I was nothing," she replied. "You became my world when I had none. And now I choose you not because I am loyal, but because I am loved." They spoke their vows without witnesses of law, only witnesses of truth. When Luke kissed her, the men cheered as if the land itself had shifted into something new. Years passed like soft rain. The ranch grew, not just in cattle. And laughter. And safety. And children who ran barefoot through dust that once carried only cruelty. Luke became known not as the reckless man he once was, but as the unwavering one. Deals were fair. Labor was respected. No worker went unseen again, not after the woman who had once been invisible became the heart of the land. Clara became known as the soul of the ranch. Women came to her seeking work and safety. Children gathered around her for stories by firelight. Men listened when she spoke, and at Luke's side, she stood not as an echo, but as a voice. Chosen. One evening many years later, Luke and Clara sat on the same porch where he had once mocked her. Gray had touched Luke's hair. Lines of wisdom softened Clara's face. The sunset burned red against the key sky. Luke reached for her hand. "You remember the day I called you tag-along?" he asked. She smiled. "I remember every day. I was a fool." "You were lost," she corrected gently. "Now you are found." He chuckled softly. "Funny. I thought I took you as a joke." "You did," she said. "And now?" She leaned into him. "Now you are the punchline in the best story this land will ever tell." He kissed her forehead. I stopped laughing the moment I realized the woman who wouldn't leave my side was the woman I could never live without. She closed her eyes in peace. The wind carried their story across the plains of a man who learned too late but loved deeply, and a woman who stayed long enough to be seen.